Welcome to Love and Trauma, the real deal. I'm Danielle Sebastian, best-selling author, coach, and yes, I've been through the marriage trenches myself. This show is all about how to actually deal with trauma in relationships and make it work without losing your mind. If you're ready for honest talk, no fluff, and tools that cut through the noise, tune in because let's face it, love can be a bit of a mess, but it's a mess worth figuring out. This is Love and Trauma, the real deal. This month on the show has been absolutely incredible, and I can't wait to share my favorite moments with you today. So, February brought some really powerful conversations about breaking free from patterns that no longer serve us: control, people pleasing, emotional overwhelm. And they also brought tools that actually help us heal. But here's something really special about this lineup. I actually got to meet all three of these incredible women at the Women Thrive Retreat. And two of them have even written their powerful stories in the newest edition and best-selling book, Women Thrive Volume 4. So, in this recap episode, I'm going to play my favorite moments from my interviews with these three amazing women. So, first up is going to be Heather Hansen. She really showed us what happens when the survival skills that once kept us safe, like perfectionism and control, turn into walls that end up keeping us isolated. We also explored in this clip the startling connection between trauma and chronic health issues, her go-to tools for regulating herself after being triggered, and how she finally broke through her resistance to sharing her past and what it took to truly heal. My second clip is from my interview with Nicole Gotthold and her story of using breath work to move through the grief of losing her husband and finally release some of the stored trauma that she'd been carrying is something that we all need to hear. We got into how breath work can help regulate your nervous system, the connection between past experiences, emotional triggers, and the subconscious mind, and how to separate triggers from the truth so you're responding and not reacting. And finally, I sat down with Amy Sanders, and she was the ultimate people pleaser. She pulled back the curtain on how people pleasing sneaks into our relationships, drains us, and keeps us stuck. She also showed how she carried some of these patterns into multiple relationships without even realizing it, and then how becoming a stepmom to teenagers finally forced her to stop taking things personally and break free from the need to make everyone happy. But here's the thing. What you'll hear today isn't just about them. It's about you. Their stories are filled with lessons that could be the exact shift that you need to stop repeating the same cycles and start moving towards real peace, connection, and happiness. And trust me, you're going to want to stay until the very end because I'm going to share what I really want you to take away from these three amazing women and how you can implement it. So grab a coffee, get comfy, and let's dive in to the best of February on Love and Trauma, the real deal.
And I learned that as small children, by the time we're 5, how we perceive our environment is how we determine the world is and how life is. So we create these things about us, these truths that at the time we think it's true, but they were never true. Instead, it's the exact opposite almost. And so I learned this methodology where if you start feeling anxious, nervous, sad, angry, you need to stop and think about what you're even thinking about in that moment. And if and realizing, well, what am I believing? This situation is going on and now I'm all upset about it. But knowing that if my body's reacting that way, whatever I'm thinking, whatever I'm believing is not quite true, that something else must be more true instead. And just looking at things that way of knowing, oh, I'm feeling this way, so whatever I'm thinking is not true. Sometimes I can just table it and say, whatever you're thinking is not true, keep going. Other times might need to sit down and rewind it, right? And so when I showed up there in Pennsylvania, I knew what to expect. I knew my mom, I know what she does. I wasn't going to expect her to do anything else. And that was okay because I had no expectations of anything else going on. And it was okay that she's that way because that's her. And once I started thinking that way and using those tools, everything else just falls into place, right? You can handle any situation.
And I think it's important for partners to know this, that this reflection needs to occur, right? And it's not immediate. It's not, I'm sure, it isn't for my partner, where it's not like you have the emotion and you can do this in 3 minutes.
Right.
And then be fine, right? You need a break. But it was hard as a partner when my husband would withdraw. It was withdraw. And sometimes, a really long time withdraw. And it was really hard not to take personally. But it was when I realized that this was his way of regulating, and I was able to remove myself from that withdrawal. It wasn't about me. That that we were both able to work on it together, and then he's now way more able to do it more successfully and communicate with me that, hey, no, I just need a little break. I'm feeling my things. And so now our relationship is so much better because I was able to understand it and then give him the peace to do so without nagging, getting in his face. Why are you doing this? Why are you acting like this? Why are you shutting me out? All those things didn't work.
They didn't, right? Because if you meet those two energies together, right? So if you have this anxious, nervous energy over here and you're meeting it with an anxious, nervous energy, it's just going to do the exact opposite of what you want. But if you approach with curiosity of, hey, babe, what's going on today? Do you need some space? Are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help? And if they say, you know what, no, I just need some time, just give them time to go and do that, right? It was hard for me to admit, though, that I needed those things, right? Because I had it all together. Nothing bothers me. I'm the one that stays like this. It felt like defeat to me to have to admit that at first. And now I know it's not defeat. It's just how your body works, right? And because I work with the physiology of the body, right? And how the brain affects what the body's doing, I realized you need to actually apply the tools that you're teaching your clients to yourself, Missy, right? Because sometimes we can know so much.
Yes.
And then we forget to apply it to our own selves.
No, my husband would have rather, I don't know, get a root canal than tell me that he needed a break, that
Yes.
he was processing his emotions. I mean, it was so hard. You guys, you have the shame so deep that, that is so hard for you. But once you realize you have, you can do it. It's okay. You didn't cause it, right?
Right.
It releases the shame when you name it. And then hopefully everybody can have somebody on the other side who understands it and
Yes.
can sit with that and be okay with those breaks.
Mhm.
That's what
Definitely.
I wish for everyone.
Yes.
But I think it's such a big thing how the physical effects of childhood trauma. I think it's an unmet need. And as you mentioned, it's a huge sign. We talk about the mental health, side effects, the depression, the anxiety, all that. But the way that the body reacts when you're suppressing those things is something that I want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
So when you had those things that were coming out in childhood, did any of your doctors, even into adolescence, correlate your home life with those outward
Not
effects?
not once was I ever asked about anything. I was more labeled a mystery of we don't know what's going on with you. I have no idea. And I did grow up in a small town, and the doctor that I went to, he had a house as an office, right? And he had this cabinet full of pills and bottles, and he would be like, I don't know, let's try this. And he would go to his cabinet and he'd open it, and in this little manila envelope, he would, here you go, try these, see if this works. And so I was never asked. And then when I was 19, 20, I was having a lot of symptoms come roaring back because because I never dealt with the emotions. Even though I left where I was, I still had a lot of symptoms because I had a lot of hatred for myself that I was harboring, that, I was never going to be good enough and show up enough. And I just was so busy trying to be more. I wasn't paying attention to any of the things that I'd done. And the symptoms just kept getting worse. I'd have headaches all the time. I would get bloated. My menstrual cycles were so heavy that it was almost unbearable. My emotions and my rage. And at that time, I had a fear. It's like, oh my God, are you turning into your dad? Is this genetic? Is this anger genetic? And I would have all these racing thoughts through my head. And at the time, I would go to the military base, which people went to the military base at the hospital sometimes several times a week, right? Because there was all these things that were going on with me. But I can tell you right now, I never told anyone that I was starving myself for days. Never, nor did anyone ask. And at times I got down to 90, 95 pounds, and no one asked me, are you okay? In those initial years. No one asked me, hey, is something going on? Do you think maybe you need to talk to somebody? Not once. It's just one doctor to another of, I don't know, I can't explain this, go over here. I can't explain this, go over here. And I desperately wanted someone to tell me how to fix the problem. And I kept telling my doctors, multiple of them, can you tell me how to fix this? I get it. I have, I was labeled autoimmune thyroid. I have autoimmunity. I was told I was just going to have to live with the symptoms. And it didn't make sense to me that I was so young and I was just going to have to live like that. And so it just was one doctor after another after another. And I was never through this whole course asked if everything was okay until I ended up having a hysterectomy that I didn't know I was going to have. I thought I was just going to have a dermoid tumor removed. And I woke up with a full hysterectomy. And that surgeon, when I went back to him, he asked me, are you okay? You're losing too much weight. What's going on? But I didn't tell him.
No, but that's not the point, I don't think.
Right.
Right? I mean,
Right.
anybody who knows about trauma, should know that it's about repeatedly gaining that trust.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or you have to have that trust before anybody's gonna
Yes.
come out and say
You have to.
yes. But it's about addressing those things and getting them, the potential help when you suspect.
Right. It was. But I was still a hindrance to that doctor actually
Yeah.
helping. If I would have told him, he would have gotten me the help. But I was still bound and determined, you don't tell anybody, you fix it yourself. And so I still kept being my own roadblock into that. And it was pretty interesting. And then the chapter I wrote is as I went on my healing journey that I was going to fix this because there was a way and I knew it. Writing a letter to my parents 17, 18 years ago. And I wrote it out. I hand wrote it and I put it in the mail and I mailed it to them. I have no idea if they read it. I'm certain my dad never read it, but if my mom got it, she may or may not have read it. Um, that looking back was such a huge piece to my healing, and I had no idea at the time. But because my autoimmunity, the symptoms got less and less and less and less. I just thought it was what I was eating. Like, oh, you changed your
Mhm.
food and you're doing it this way. But then after I learned, oh, wow, this is a major process, I really dumped a lot of emotions out in that letter. And I sent it. So I wasn't keeping all those things inside anymore.
And that was such a release.
It was. I had no idea,
Yeah.
but now I do know.
Control was how I showed up. And I remember working with a coach in particular who asked me what I wanted for my relationships. And I drew a complete blank because what I really needed, I didn't feel like I deserved or that I could even trust that anyone could show up with it because I knew I couldn't show up with it either. And that everything was a gift. So how can you demand anything when it's a gift? And so it took a better part of like a year for me to really start writing down what I wanted my life to look like in every capacity and accept that what I was writing down wasn't a pipe dream, that it could actually be my life. And then furthermore, start to take a real inventory of how much I was letting other people control whether I had it and looking to others to fill my cup.
You're in a relationship now.
I am, yeah. And it was challenging because we were both going through our own individual things. And there were times when things would come up and I had to do that braiding thing that I shared with you. You know, how much of this is my trauma of losing my husband? And that if I didn't have the same with you, it wouldn't have been replaced or enough or fixed. How much of this is um, your situation and not mine to own at all? And frankly, I think when we're in those situations, we have a choice to make. We're either in it with compassion or we're out. And we have the right to make that choice. But if we're going to be in it, the judging of both has to go, right? It's a communication, it's a process. It's being confident enough to say, as this comes out of my mouth, I know that this is not fair of me to ask of you, but this is where I'm currently at. And so I would oftentimes hold things back until that unbraiding was finished. I wouldn't say anything when I was really upset about something, although I'm pretty sure you knew. I would kind of be quiet and then I would do the work. Okay, this is coming up. This is triggering me. Holidays are a big one, you know, who was with who when and the kids and all of that. Um, and trying to make everything the way we wanted it to be. Taking the signals of people being unhappy as it all not being okay when it's normal that everyone's going to have, you know, emotions and things that come up. Um, and then asking those questions. How much of this is because I fear or I'm hurting the hole that was left? How much of this isn't okay? The situation is something that has to be healed and we have to have that conversation. And how much of this is something I wouldn't want for my future, regardless of who's in it? In other words, don't lose sight of what you really want and knowing that that other person, if at some point they can't fill it, it's okay to say that we're not right for each other. But not staying with someone because of the potential you think they have.
Yeah. And so the breath work and the work that you've done has allowed you to be able to ask those questions.
Oh, yes. So it separated it. Yeah, it separated the difference because when you somatically process something, because it's always connected to a deeper root. So if, for example, if everybody can't be together for a holiday, that means we're not a real family. And if I'm not a real family, then I'm alone.
Right.
Right? That's a pretty
Where
straight
is
line.
this coming from?
Yeah, right. Why does it
Uh-huh.
really matter? It really matters because I don't want to feel alone on a holiday. And this comes from not just him passing, but from being a military family with him going on holidays, right? If we don't have these high point moments, we're not a real family. If we're not a real family, then I'm alone. The alone is the root wound. And that one is like a projector light that will cast its shadow on any time I feel like I'm alone. And that might seem ridiculous because, of course, I'm not alone. I know that in my head and in my heart. Of course, that's not what it means. But the reason it has that charge is from that central core wound. And not acknowledging that connection is what allows us to not realize, like, not to be able to control, like, what is the source of it. And when you're in these breathwork sessions you see the connection clear as day, because what really helps you see the connection is you take that fear of judgment, that shame, and your prefrontal cortex, because it's being manipulated with the breath work, steps aside. And all that's left is truth, which is that you are not alone. You are connected. You are here. You are loved. And that's all you feel when you're in that place. When you see it from that perspective, you get on the plane. You're high above the mess and you see it from up here. You're not tired. You're not disempowered. You're not fearful. All that goes away. And from that perspective, you see the truth. And as you are bringing that emotion and you're releasing it, when you come back down to earth and you're in the moment, that's gone. And now you see it for exactly what it is. I see the connection. I see why it did it. I can now say things and feel things differently. And this is really important because if you process it somatically and you just let it go and you don't acknowledge, okay, I see that connection. I see that that's not the case. The next time you feel that way, by processing it that way and consciously disconnecting it, you then, the next time it comes around, oh, busy, silly mind, I know what this is coming from. I know this doesn't have power over me. And you can laugh at yourself because you've made that connection and you've let it go.
Because if there's one thing I know, it's that trauma and childhood trauma and any sort of trauma is very complex. And I love
It's hard to talk about in 30 minutes.
Yes. And
yeah.
but I love that that's why I want to do the show, is because I want people to realize that there are all kinds of different tools that we can try, that we can use in order to release the hold that some of that trauma has, and that it's the things that might be impacting your relationships or the way that you want to be. There's many different modalities, and I love being able to think about using multiple different ways to heal.
Yeah, and I mean, these big sessions are really cathartic, but there's also a couple of 5-minute practices that I started to implement every day as part of my meditation, which was to set the rudder for where I wanted to go today. Set the intention for how I wanted to feel emotionally, because emotions are energy in motion. That's what they are. And they are this beautiful feedback for where you're at. And so if you're feeling emotions that you don't love, regardless of the situation, regardless if you're justified, it does not matter whether you feel justified in feeling how you do or not. If it's coming up, there's a reason. And the more we ignore it and not feel it and not let it go, the more it distorts the filter with which we see the world, right? And so looking at it, loving it, and letting it go and doing what you need to do, that whole process is our individual responsibility. Breathing is the one part of our body, the one part of our system that connects both the conscious and the subconscious. And there's an aptitude of our brain, even as adults, that we can reprogram. There's a mechanism that we can actually tap into that allows us to reprogram those old beliefs. That to me is revolutionary, and it's been there the whole time. It's flabbergasting to me.
It's never too late.
It's never
too late. It is possible.
Yeah. And I have been healing generational trauma. You know, my mom is 70 and we have conversations that she'll tell you we never thought we would have, perspectives and shifts and changes. And it came from one of us, including her, at time being the one that was able to shift out of role of mother or daughter. So when we're in relationships, and this is an important piece, when we're triggered, we show up with a persona that helps us be safe. And whether your system goes into freeze, fight, or flight, whatever it does for you, it does it beautifully. And it did it in a time in your life when it needed to keep you safe. And so if it still shows up in that pattern, it's still doing this beautiful thing of keeping you safe. So we can just stay there for a minute because that's really important. It's not better if you're someone who's always fixing things versus someone who freezes. Neither is better or worse. It's just the way your system shows up. But acknowledging that computer malfunction, right? It's happened in a time where you needed to survive, that it can be rewired. It takes you wanting to and having the hope. It's that person has to want it from themselves and have to have the hope that it can. And the process is not miraculous. It's not an easy fix. It takes them doing the work, coming back, but it's absolutely possible. I mean, I went from being 340 pounds when my husband first passed away. And one of my major coping mechanisms is eating, especially with emotionally. And that first year, I lost like 65 pounds of it completely the way I used to always do it. And then when I completely burned out, I had to find a way to not use a coping mechanism that wasn't healthy. At the same time, be forgiving and compassionate of self. Totally different vibration. And it's something I still work on. But I have to have hope. I have to be willing. I have to want to do it differently. And I have to see how the way I've been doing it is no longer serving me.
Because I was so big of a people pleaser enough to marry someone when I knew I shouldn't. They had to be small steps, but each time I took a step, I reclaimed a little more of my power. And when I say that, it wasn't the power I lost from just marrying him. I feel like it was the power that I lost even in childhood. It was the power that I was born with that somehow was taken from me.
You made the decision to leave.
Yeah.
What did the leaving look like for you?
Oh, it was since then I've gone through even harder things, but up to that point in my life, that was the hardest thing I have ever done. It was the hardest thing for so many reasons. Number one, this was my relationship. I was walking away from this relationship that I had had for 11 years. And even though it needed to happen, that is still a loss. It's a very big loss. It's grief. It's all the things. I felt like I was the one splitting up the family. Um, I was labeled at my church, so I was scared of that, and it did happen. I lost relationships even within my family, including my dad. I lost a lot. The loss was extremely great. However, at the same time, as I made that decision, the most amazing things started happening. And I'm a woman of faith, and honestly, I can see God throughout everything that was happening. And even having him out of the house because the relationship was so toxic, once that was gone, I was such a broke single mom. I like to tell people, I'm like, I was a broke single mom. Guys, it was $24,000 with 3 kids that I was living on by my own. I didn't move back in with my parents. Like, that's how much I was bringing in at the time with 3 little kids. Do the math. It was awful. But I got really scrappy. And even though you can look at the finances and be, that was so awful, and the grief was so deep, and I was, lonely in a different way now. And there was just so much. At the same time, there was such a sweetness between me and my kids. There was a peace in the home that I hadn't seen really ever since I had married him. And then just the reclaiming of myself and like my own self-respect and learning truly what Amy wanted was incredible. So it's like, even though my life got way messier in certain ways, there was still peace throughout that period of time. And there was so much growth and so much healing that could never start happening until I was away from all of that. So there's always beauty in the mess, right? And there was definitely beauty.
What did you do during this time period to make sure that those same things that took you to where you were in that relationship weren't going to be the same things that you took into another relationship?
Yeah, good question. It's interesting because I really did take some of those same things into my new relationship. So
Of course, yes.
even though I tried not to, it did happen, which is why I laugh, because I've
Yeah.
had to learn within this relationship some of those enabling behaviors that I would do. Um, However, there were certain things that were non-negotiables as I moved forward. At the time, because I was in so much pain and heartache, there was a lot of betrayal and other things that I was also healing from. I don't want to discount it, make it less than it was because it was a lot. So it was like the heartbreak of leaving, but also a lot of other heartbreak of other things that were going on. I had sworn that I would never remarry, and I only wanted to date guys so that they could tell me I was pretty and take me to a nice dinner.
Very superficial. Yeah.
I was like, can you just open my door, tell me I'm pretty, and pay for dinner tonight? Like, I just want out of the house. Like, that's really what my goal was with men.
Yeah.
God had a different idea for me. And so when I met my now husband, he came at a time that at the time I say is the worst time in my life for him to have shown up, but it probably was the best for both of us looking back. And so I wasn't quite ready to have like a real relationship when it started happening. So I was dating guys and they were telling me I was pretty and they were opening up my doors. But anyway, he landed in my lap and that, that new chapter started unfolding and we're still together today. But uh I was good at keeping some of my own boundaries that I used to not keep. Some of the enabling behaviors I did start seeing show up in my current relationship. And we've had to do a lot of work around those because it also led to some really hard things that have happened in our relationship. And so, what I've learned is as you're continually developing and growing and making progress, you will choose the path of least resistance. And so really asking the why, like, okay, so why? And then the why, what do I actually want? Like, what is it? Because a lot of times as women, especially, I know that so many women are similar to how I was, is like, you just agree, okay, yeah, I'll do that. Oh, sure. Yeah. And because we're nurturers, right? We want to help people. We want to connect with people. We want to feel appreciated by people. And all those things are not bad. They're just bad when you're self-betraying, when you're really, truly not speaking your truth, and when you are really, truly turning away from things that serve you for things that don't. That's when it's a problem. And so getting really curious with a simple question that, like you said, is very impactful will help you find yourself again, which is what I had to do. And so,
And then in a relationship, then you're able to put some words to things,
yeah. Yeah.
which is so important because that's where a lot of resentment and disconnect occurs, is when we can't put words to things. And so we're both thinking that something else is going on and it may not have anything to do with that. But if we can't put words to things, then you can never get to a resolution.
No, you can't. And really, I like to say, as we're doing this work, it's like I look at like the street, like I'll clean my side of the street, you clean your side of the street, and then let's meet in the middle and have a good time. And understand that your mess is your mess, my mess is my mess. We can help each other, but let's not be so codependent that it's unhealthy. Let's support each other. And that was probably the biggest lesson that I've had to learn with my new husband. So we have a really tricky relationship with our kids. We have 7 kids now. So I went from 3 to 7, and 5 of them are 1 year apart. And when we got together, a lot
and they're
of
teenagers, right?
yeah, we got all kinds of teenagers. Yeah. So it's complicated, right? Second marriages are really complicated as is. But if you both have kids, it gets more complicated. If there's one ex still living, it gets more complicated. If there's another ex, if there's 2 exes, it's more complicated, So it's like we just signed up for the most complicated dynamic. If there's mental illness, it's more complicated. So anyway, that's our life. But what I was going to say is because of my people pleaser, I really started to lose myself as a stepmom because of trying to please these people that are impossible to please. By the way, no one wants a stepmom. It's not something that anyone really wants, no matter how cool you are. And
Yeah.
so I've had to learn, even within those relationships, like how to show up and not take it personally, because a lot of the things that were going on had nothing to do with me, even though I was choosing to be hurt by them, you know? So it's like learning that this isn't personal. This is just situational, and it ebbs and flows and comes and goes. But yeah.
Teenagers have an amazing way of knowing your weakness
Oh my
and
gosh, I know.
sticking a stick right in it. It's very difficult to not
I
take
know.
that personally. So how did you do that? How do you not take it personally?
When it comes to my stepkids, well, first of all, when it comes to people, all of us are in our own what we call dreams, right? One book that I absolutely love that I'd recommend everyone on the planet reading, if you haven't already, are The Four Agreements. It's called The Four
Yeah.
Agreements.
Mhm.
And when you don't take things personally and realize that everyone is in their own dream, their own paradigm, they're living their own life, and essentially not meaning to be selfish, but it's about them, right? When you look at it like that, you're able to give more grace. I'm not saying that you can allow people to mistreat you, but you can come from a place of understanding. And so when it comes to my stepchildren, they are amazing humans, but they have been in a really unhealthy, toxic environment. And they have been taught that certain people are not okay to love, which is me. I'm not okay to love. Now that they're getting a little older, it's getting better, but we had to go through a lot of really big, hard stuff in order for the truth to come out. And I do think that the truth will always prevail if you stay in a place of integrity and if you stay in a place of doing the best you can to love. And when I say integrity, I mean like for yourself. Because when you're coming from a place of integrity to where you're always proud of how you showed up, you don't let a lot of that resentment and a lot of that crap creep in. And it gives other people the freedom to show up how they want to show up. And that, you know what? They might not show up the best. And that's okay. You can just look at that and be like, right. But in this moment, I am proud of how I showed up, which means I have self-trust. And when you have self-trust, you have more self-love. It just compounds. All those things compound, which is how it helps me not take things personally. As difficult as a lot of the experiences are that we have had to go through, I am totally proud of how I've showed up. And I've gotten better over time, which we want to evolve and we want to grow, right? So that's great. But I can look back and just say, yeah, I'm glad how I showed up, even though they might have not showed up in the best way for me. But now a lot of the stuff like that happened over time, and they've seen me over time, they love me for it. It's changed.
Coming full circle.
Yeah. And so it's like, and I say this like this is my experience with having stepchildren, but you can do this with any relationship,
Yeah.
standing in your power.
Banging your head against the wall, trying to navigate the complexities of a relationship impacted by childhood trauma, it doesn't have to be this daunting. When you're married to a partner with unresolved childhood trauma, it can feel like you're walking on eggshells, never quite knowing what will set them off. No matter what you try, it feels like there's always something triggering another emotional response that seems completely out of context. And the harder you try to fix it, the more discouraged you feel. So what's the issue here? Navigating marriage with a trauma survivor is different. The love languages don't work. Date nights don't work. Self-help books don't help. But here's the good news. I've created something that does work. Something built from years of hard-earned lessons and real-life experience. Ready to take the first step toward real change? Let's talk. I'm offering a free one-on-one call where we'll dive into what's going on in your relationship and figure out a way forward together. This isn't just another quick chat. It's a chance to finally be heard, to share what you're going through with someone who truly gets it. No judgment, just real support. So if you're ready to start making sense of it all and find a little more peace in your marriage, book your free call now. Your happiness, your peace, and your relationship are worth it. Let's do it together.
Oh, that was amazing. And I want to thank all of my guests for being so vulnerable. But what I really want everyone to take from this episode is one thing, and that is that if what you have always done is no longer serving you, I want you to use this as a sign that is it fear that's keeping you from trying different things? Is it not wanting anyone to see your weakness, not wanting anyone to know? I want you to think about this. But what I want you to hear from each one of these amazing women who have overcome a lot of that resistance and fear is that they did it in small steps. And I really want you to hear that it doesn't necessarily have to be releasing some of that power that those feelings and that trauma and the heaviness has over you. It doesn't have to just be about talk therapy. Heather was able to write a letter to start releasing some of that. Nicole uses breath work, and Amy just used small steps where she started to gain back her power. So this is your wake up call today. If you are finding that your relationships are suffering, if your health is suffering, and you just aren't where you need to be, and you think that this might be part of what you need to release to have the best life ever, this is the time. All right. Well, I will see everybody next week. Thank you for joining.
All right, that's a wrap for today on Love and Trauma, the real deal. Big thanks to my guests for sharing their insights. Couldn't have done it without you. Now, for those of you looking to take this journey further, I've got something special. Head to my website to grab Real Tactics, Real Healing, a survivor's playbook for navigating a relationship with a trauma survivor. It's packed with everything you need to know, do, and say to navigate the emotional minefield, find your balance, and regain your self-worth and happiness.